Hello, welcome to Consolation League, Warhammer Podcast. This is our very first episode. I'm one of your hosts, Scott,
And I'm Paul. We're
and this,
brothers.
yeah, we're brothers in case you can't tell. This podcast is for those of us who don't place in the top rankings and really just enjoy playing in local games and tournaments. We'll focus mostly on what brought us into the hobby itself, list building, local games, local tournaments, um, and just overall trying to get better at this amazing game called Warhammer. We're going to focus on both Age of Sigmar and 40K, with I imagine a small peppering of Horus Heresy, because Paul is
Yep,
really big into Horus Heresy.
for
So we'll
sure.
probably talk about that a little bit too. But in this first episode, we really wanted to kind of get into what brought us to the hobby and what have we learned since first joining the hobby. There's a lot that you can do when it comes to Warhammer. You can get into painting, building, collecting, playing, really fine tuning your painting so that you're making really display pieces and dioramas, and really turning it into a proper art form. So, and then there's obviously the hardcore gaming aspect where you get into really competitive list building and what a lot of people refer to as chasing the meta. So kind of doing the best of the best and building out lists that way. So we're going to take a few steps back, kind of talk about when we first got into it, what edition it was that brought us into it, who inspired us to get into it, and kind of go from there. So I think, Paul, do you want to kick it off a little bit,
Sure.
seeing as
Yeah, sure. So I got into Warhammer with ninth edition really during the pandemic. And it's kind of funny to say ninth edition because I didn't play it at all when I first got into it. We were all in lockdown. And I was aware of Games Workshop. I was aware of Warhammer through video games. And I don't know if you remember this, Scott, there was even a Games Workshop in the local mall where
right
we
next
grew
to
up.
Web Slingers, our local comic
Yeah.
store. Yeah.
Yeah. And but I'd never really gotten into it like at all. Not
Felt
from
it
I
felt
kind of
daunting. Like looking at that store, it was like, what is this thing?
it yeah, it like I couldn't wrap my head around it. This was like the 90s and I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. It didn't make any sense to
Yeah.
me. And I didn't know anyone that played, right?
No.
Which is um always can or it can often be a hurdle to getting into these kind of things. So there we were during the pandemic, during lockdown, and my stepdaughter's boyfriend was over, and he had the I think it was the base starter set that had like a handful of Tyranid mo or no, it would be a handful of Necrons and a handful of Space Marines, and he was just sitting at the table painting it. And my wife Janet was like, "Oh, that looks kind of cool. Like, we're always brainstorming to find things to do with the kids, especially during that point in time." And,
Yeah.
we dipped our toes into Dungeons and Dragons. We'd played other board games like Catan, a game called Dominion. Like we were always trying to find things to do that would kind of bridge the gaps. We have four kids between us of a varying age range, so it was always challenging to find something that we could all play together as a group. And so we went to our local game store, Kingston Gaming Nexus, and chatted to the store owner there, and he talked a little bit about like what the game was about and what the factions were and all those kind of things. And he gave us great advice. He was like, just basically pick something that you like the look of, and don't go nuts. Like he actually was like, don't bother buying like this big starter set or anything like that. Just buy a box of minis that you like the look of and see what you think and go from there. And then he actually directed us to, look onto YouTube, get on YouTube. There's tons of people teaching you how to paint, how to play the game, all that kind of stuff. So I picked up a box of Chaos Space Marines and a box of Havocs, also Chaos Space Marines. And my wife, she picked up a a Retributor squad, Adeptus Sororitas Retributor squad, and a Battle Sister squad. And we just started hobbying from there. Just at the kitchen table, putting the minis together, having fun doing it, really.
Mhm.
And that's what really kind of got me started on it. So I really focused at the beginning on collecting, hobbying, painting. That was my kind of first draw to it. I
Mhm.
was starting to watch lore videos, and just trying to learn more about it. But what really sucked me in was the hobbying part of it.
Yeah, and I
Um,
remember getting like text from you and being like, "Hey, you should check this out. This is really cool.
mhm.
Look what I'm doing." And
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
even then I was like, "That's really impressive, but I don't know that I could do that." Like it
Yeah.
looks so daunting when you see it because the figures are really, really detailed.
Very detailed. Yeah. They
So
were super detailed. And, there was a bit of a learning curve with the painting. But I did find there's a ton of free resources online. Um, and fortunately enough, I bought enough of it that I got lots of practice. I got sucked into it right away. And I really enjoyed the hobbying part, like just the building and the painting. For me, it was like put on some music, put on a TV show in the background, and just sit there and plug away
Mhm.
at these minis. And I got hooked immediately. I got so into it. What about you? What got you into the hobby?
So it's kind of a dual-sided thing. It's really interesting that you brought up that it was kind of brought to you through the kids kind of
Hmm.
directly, and then them being interested in it kind of influenced you to get into it because um, my two boys were into playing some of the Warhammer mobile games and that kind of thing. So they would
Right.
get the big knights and stuff like that. And we were already playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we still do to this day. But they were like, is this like Warhammer is also a game we can play at home, right? And I was like, yeah, it's like minifigures and all this kind of stuff. Like I knew a little, that was pretty much all I knew. And they're like, can we do it? And I said, well, if you guys are interested in it, yeah, let's go to the local shop, check it out, and we'll go in and kind of see what the whole story is. So we went to the local. We're lucky enough to live where we live. We actually have a Warhammer store, one of the official stores. So we went in, and the managers in the stores are fantastic because they're like all about getting you hooked on everything. So they're like, oh, you're interested, let's get you a free model and teach you how to paint it, and teach you
Hmm.
all the ins and outs of the painting and stuff like that. And they're a great resource that way. You have to be very careful because it is a very expensive hobby, so it's easy to get carried away.
Yeah.
But we went in and we bought one of the three kind of starter boxes that they had. So it was it kind of got you in with, I think we bought the biggest one, the commander one, because it gave
Right.
you the most models.
Hmm.
And again, it was we just started building the Necrons and then building the Space Marines.
Right.
And we kind of approached it from the gaming aspect first
Hmm.
and then the hobby aspect.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
so because they were like, okay, let's do this, and then how do we play it? So
Yes.
I had to figure out how to play and then build and then paint and do all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. Um, but they were really young, and again, it was during COVID. It was ninth edition. It was
Hmm.
probably a year after you had started doing all of your stuff, and then I think it was the like next summer type of thing because
That sounds right.
the
Yeah.
stores had just opened up again, so we were able to
Right.
go in with our masks on and actually talk to people again. So we did that. They were young, so the building and everything kind of bored them a little bit. They just wanted to
Hmm.
play. So it was on me to build everything, learn
Right.
the rules, and then play. And then it was on me to kind of do a lot of the painting. They were
Right.
okay doing fast stuff, like
Hmm.
spray some lead belcher on
Hmm.
a Necron, a little bit of the green onto their glowing pieces, and gold
Right.
on their little glyphs,
Hmm.
and away you go. And you've got a Necron kind of going. Um, Space Marine's a little bit more in depth because of all the power armor and the pieces
Yeah.
on them and the pouches and all that kind of stuff. So that actually hooked me onto the hobby piece. And
Hmm.
I would play a little bit with the boys just to keep them entertained, and then was still going into the hobby aspect of trying to refine my painting. And I know I've said it. I know you're probably like sick of hearing me say it, but it was one of those things of being, I'm also colorblind. So being one of
Hmm.
those things of like, well, how can I actually paint these things to make them look good when I don't even know what colors I'm putting on
That's right.
places?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because what is it like? Green looks brown to you,
yeah,
or
it's like green and red are is what I'm bad with. So
right?
um like anything, and ironically like blood angels, I really like those.
Hmm.
um but that's a color that I can't really see or tell if I'm doing
Right.
properly.
Yeah.
So I deviated away from doing my army in red, but I played with it a lot, and it was one of those things I was bouncing around with. But when you're doing the hobby, it's really easy to get sucked into what models look cool and building
Yes.
them out so that, I'm picking a cool looking model, and
Yep.
you have no idea whether that's a good thing for the game or not. Um, so that's something I really wanted to kind of get better at when I was doing it, was like, okay, this captain looks really cool, but what the hell is his story? Like, how does he actually perform on the table and
Right.
things like that? Um, so that's kind of the road that I went down. So it was a little bit brought in from the kids, and then you were influencing stuff, and we were able to trade pictures back and
Yeah.
forth and be like, hey, look what I was doing. Look at the
Yeah.
mistakes I've made.
Yeah. Look what I just bought this week.
Yeah, that's what it turned into for sure. It was I ran out to the store and I bought this entire squad. What do you think?
Yeah. 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 No, like when I look back, I was like, oh man, like some of the stuff I bought where I definitely was like, oh, well, that was not for me. That was a waste of money.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I really didn't understand GW's almost like its business model of like, so I remember buying for example, the Grey Knights versus
Thousand Suns.
Thousand Suns box.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, it's all new models on the inside. But that wasn't the case at all. It was two new models.
Mhm.
And then that was it. It was a new
Yeah.
character for the Grey Knights and a new character for the Thousand Suns. And I was like, oh, okay. So this isn't all new stuff. Because I remember building those first Grey Knights. I'm like, they're kind of small. They're smaller than Space Marines.
They're more
Doesn't make
elite
any
than Space
sense.
Marines, but they're really tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't quite get this. So I was definitely like caught by I was totally into getting like the newest thing all the time. Um which led me like I didn't actually play the game until I think I did a couple of I think you and I played over Skype with
Yep.
the Imperium magazine, which we both
Hmm.
subscribed to, with its kind of like starter missions that we kind of did over Zoom.
Yep.
And then we started, I think I was starting to build like an Eldar army, and we started to play that likewise over Zoom
Hmm.
a little bit. And my actual playing itself didn't start really developing until Horus Heresy came out. I saw that box. I loved all the stuff I was reading online about that community and that narrative kind of style. And that box, that Age of Darkness box, like really sucked me in, and it was great.
It's a great
And that
box. It's a
it's
really great box.
yeah, I mean, I thought it was fantastic starter set.
Hmm.
I mean, it makes you gives you the idea that you're building two armies out of it. That's not the case. Really, it's a good starter for one army, but
Yeah.
so that was the first rule book I'd actually taken the time to read, was that Horus Heresy Age of Darkness rule book. And that really ignited my desire to play the game. So
Hmm.
I ended up going to my friendly local gaming store in Kingston and talked to them. And they have like basically a board, an online board for you to match up with other players, see who's playing. People throw up messages being like, "Hey, I'm looking for a game on Saturday. Is anyone available?" That kind of stuff. And that's how I started actually playing the game was by saying, "Hey, I've got horse heresy. I'm brand new, and I'd like to get some learn to play games in." And we've got a really good horse heresy community here. We've got a great Warhammer community period here,
Mhm.
and that's what sucked me in. And I started playing those games, and then all of a sudden the light bulb switches on. Oh, okay. If I build the guy with this, that's going to cost so many points.
Yeah.
And while it looks cool, it's not effective for actually playing the game. It turned everything around for me because like you, I was building things like this looks great. Put
Hmm.
that on the model, put that on the vehicle. And then once I started playing games and I was like, oh, that looks really good, but that's not as effective as that weapon option.
That weapon kind of sucks.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, that didn't work out as I thought. It looks great,
yeah.
but it's not efficient.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and then tail end of ninth, you got the boarding action terrain. And
Which
that was the first proper ninth edition that I played was those like small boarding action missions, which I loved. I thought was awesome.
I love boarding actions. It's one of my favorite game modes that they've got. And the fact that
Hmm.
they're not kind of embracing it more in 10th as of right now
Yeah,
is really disappointing because it's the best way to get in and get a quick game in because
absolutely.
Warhammer can take a long time to play,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
you can get a boarding actions game in like an hour, hour and a half maybe
Yeah.
if it's
And I
taking a
haven't
while
I mean maybe we should do an episode on boarding action
for sure.
in 10th and like the detail of that because for me I loved that format was amazing.
Hmm.
And I like long games, don't get me wrong. Like Heresy plays best at 3,000 points. So you're talking a 4 hour game with a couple guys who know what the rules and know
Yeah,
the flow of the missions. Um, I've played 4,500 point games that take 5.5 hours.
that
So
feels that feels crazy. Being only a
it's a
40K
commitment.
player, like that's a
It's
lot
a
of models.
it's a lot of models. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of
Hmm.
money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I so now all that kind of has gotten me more focused on playing the game. So it was really Horus Heresy that got me into playing the game, and then our games of boarding action really enticed me into 40K's
Hmm.
actual gameplay.
Yeah, I'd say it's similar to me. It was one of those things where I was learning the rules, but because the boys were so young, I wasn't really too
Hmm.
strict about a lot of the stuff.
Yes.
I was wanting to keep them entertained, so I wasn't, we weren't playing for objectives, we weren't playing for
Hmm.
secondaries. We maybe
Right.
played with CP re-rolls a little bit here and there.
Yep.
Um, but I didn't get into the actual game until I had
Hmm.
started again playing the boarding actions and going in and the first real games that I was playing was actually when I joined you up in Kingston at Nexus
Hmm.
for one of the tournaments.
Yeah, it
Um,
was the Welcome to 10th tournament, I think.
yeah,
I think it was like a was it 1,000 point intro?
something like that. It was supposed to be friendly type of thing, and that's a different thing that we'll get into. It was a really
Yep.
friendly environment,
Hmm.
but never get conned into oh, these are just friendly lists,
Yeah, yeah,
descriptions
yeah.
on a tournament, because
You know, yeah, the
it's a
friendly list.
grain of
Uh,
salt.
yeah, grain of salt.
Um,
Yeah, a friendly tournament, I think, is a tournament where your players are good sports.
yes.
No one's in it to necessarily like table everybody.
Hmm.
There's not while there are lists that are meta, there's no like super meta list that's just like,
Yeah.
shoot you off the table round two. And you're like, oh, this is lovely. Thanks for having me. Um,
Yeah.
but so friendly tournaments still are competitive tournaments,
Hmm.
which you and I have learned, of course, the hard way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that first tournament was like my first intro to competitive 40K playing.
Hmm. And
And I
I
can
think it's,
remember
go ahead.
you and I playing practice games. Then I think because you came up the night before, and I think we got one or two games in,
Hmm.
because we hadn't played the missions before and hadn't really played secondaries, and we're trying to figure out the rules so that we could still have fun at this thing and not slow up other people. Because
Yeah.
while it was an intro and was meant for new players, you want to put your best foot forward. And
You never want to be that guy.
yeah, you didn't want to be that guy, and you didn't want to slow people down too much and things like that. Um, so that tournament was my first real exposure to playing Warhammer outside of the confines of our
Hmm.
homes, right?
Yeah.
And uh, it was educational. I went 0 and 3. I'd like to say that that's improved, but it hasn't.
Hence the name of the podcast.
Hence the name of the podcast. But I had a
Yeah.
blast. I had a lot of fun playing. I played uh I played Black Templars
Hmm.
for that first tournament. Again, an army that I bought the box when they redid the a lot of the units when they did the army refresh with ninth edition. I saw that box and I saw those models and I was like, "Ooh, those look good. I want them."
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did you play at that tournament? I can't
I
remember.
I played my I believe it was my Imperial Fists.
Right.
Came in
Okay.
with them. So that's what I the yellow I can see, so yellow is what I have painted.
Very
Um,
good.
but I kind of play them however I want. I don't play with
Yep.
the current 10th edition Anvil Siege Force.
Right.
But yeah, that it was that's the one thing I really loved about going up to that experience was
Hmm.
it was seeing the community, seeing what it was about, playing the games and getting like an actual understanding of the rules,
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
practical firsthand experience of the rules.
Yep.
Um, and everybody just being completely honest with people and just saying, this is my first time playing.
Yep.
And people are it's actually amazing how nice people are about that. They're
Yep.
like, okay, and then they coach you along, even if they're
Yep.
beating you severely. They're like,
Yes.
you might want to consider doing this now. You might want to consider doing that. If you
Yeah.
move your models this way, it'll score you these
Y-
points.
Yeah. I definitely found that during my first game of that tournament. I can remember the other player who I think was playing Ultramarines, if I remember right. Gladius Task Force or whatever, and I'd done the Righteous Crusaders for the Templars and the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow, which allows a 6-up, feel no pain, army wide. And him explaining to me, because I was like, I don't get how this works.
Hmm.
I'm like, I'll be honest with you, I don't understand how feel no pain works. And him like actually helping me like work through it and being just like that. He's like, if you go over here, you'll score secondaries. And it was just like, oh, okay. So that's how that works. That's what that means. And it was super helpful because this guy could have just sat back there um,
Able to.
and shot me off the table
Hmm.
and been like, okay, thanks for a good game and done well for himself. I mean, it wasn't a competitive tournament, the placing wouldn't have mattered other
Yeah.
than, it would have helped him play other players in his kind of tier.
Hmm.
Um, but no, all my experiences so far, tournament playing have been good ones. Even though, I'm finishing in the bottom, I have a great time every time.
Yeah, I always view them as learning experiences because it's
Hmm.
always about and I had somebody at one of the recent tournaments we played say this. It isn't so much about beating the other person. Sometimes it's about seeing just how many points you can make sure that you're within range of with them. It's like
Mm,
it's closing the gap between you and your opponent. If you know you're playing somebody that's out of your league, you're like, okay, well, how many points am I going to let them beat me by?
right.
And kind of trying to play it that way. Because similar to the way we started playing the game, after we had done everything, and it was the experience of buying the models, learning, okay, that wasn't a good model. That's actually working in a list. These are the models that have to go into my list.
Hmm.
And future podcasts will get into how to do list building, or at least what we've learned from list building.
Yeah, I don't know if we're the best advice givers
But
on that front, but we're very good at
yeah.
explaining. I ran this and I learned this doesn't work.
This doesn't work. Um,
Um,
but it's uh it's one of those things where when you're first starting to play, you have it in your mind that it's all out war. I need to table this
yep,
person.
100%.
And that's not what the
100%.
game is. The
Not
game
at
is
all.
so much more about strategy and points. It's
Yes.
really, it's not, I'm going to shoot this thing off of there because it's the biggest thing they've got. You have to
Hmm.
look at it as that thing's really big. I have to avoid it so that I can still get my points when I go after this
Yep,
objective, or I have to go for this thing. So I need to be more strategic about where I'm moving and what I'm choosing to shoot at. Um,
definitely.
that was kind of the biggest like stumbling block that I
Yep.
had to get over was, oh, they're going to try and kill me, so I have to try and kill them while I try and get as many points as I
Hmm.
can.
Which
And
doesn't
that's
quite
not how it
often doesn't
works.
work, right? I was lucky enough to play in an escalation league. So it was for heresy, and the idea was I think our first game we started at might have been just 2,000 points or 1,500. And then next, I think it took place over a few months, but like the next stage after 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, it was you played at 2,000, then 2,500, and then the final game was like at 3,000 or 3,500, something like that. So it allowed you, I mean, it gave you goals for hobbying, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
At least if nothing else, you were building stuff that was just sitting in boxes. Um, but what I learned during those games, because it was totally friendly, there was nothing happened for whoever came first. That not that I
Right.
nothing significant that I remember. Um,
Just a good old pat on the back.
just
Well
a good
done.
solid pat on the back. And but what I learned during those games was you have to play the mission
Mhm.
and you have to be aware of if there are any secondaries, what those secondaries are. Heresy is different. It doesn't have secondaries in the same sense that 40K does, but you like had to understand what the primary mission was for
Mhm.
that match and how to play the game to that. And so that helped me. I'd like to think it helped me, but it really didn't since I've not done well at it. But at least I try. I still fall into that trap of
Mhm.
um, forgetting to play the mission and getting focused on, oh, it's my minis against your minis,
Yeah.
and I need to eliminate your minis so I can win.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's hard when your army is getting blown off the table or you're losing units and you're like, oh, I need to start getting rid of their stuff.
yes,
It's easy to get caught up in that whole, I don't want to be losing more people than they are.
I fell into that trap big time at that Critical Hit Gaming tournament we played in, and I think it was the beginning of June.
Yes.
One of the missions was the ritual from the Leviathan deck. And I had never played the mission before. So, a little pro tip here. If you're going to play a tournament,
And they have a player
practice the
pack.
missions and they have a player pack. Most of them will tell you what the missions are beforehand.
Mhm.
Play it at least once. So you understand how it goes. I mean, I think I did 1 in 3. Um, and so I still finished in the bottom tier easily, firmly. But that ritual mission like the whole sacrificing a unit shooting to summon an objective, or it works in some kind of
Yeah.
mechanic like that. I couldn't stop being like, well, I'm not going to do it with this unit or that unit because I'm going to be using them to shoot guys or charge guys.
Right.
Whereas had I held my ground and spent their action,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, on summoning objectives and things like that, I may have done better than what I did. I
Mhm.
still think I would have lost. Um, but I think it would have been more of I would have been better competition for my opponent
Yeah.
for sure. So
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, know your mission
Mhm.
and play the missions.
And getting into the whole, we're using some terms right now. If you're a brand new player, you won't understand what a
Mm,
primary mission is, what a secondary mission is, what a player pack might even be. In future podcasts, we'll kind of get into those details for you. Basically, it's just what is the rule, the major rule of that game, and then
mhm.
what is a sub rule for
Yeah.
the game, and how many points are associated with each one of those things. That's kind of a high level understanding of it. It is very easy to get caught up in um, I don't want to sacrifice shooting somebody in order to
Hmm.
get that small kind of win points
Yeah.
thing. But ultimately, that's what's going to win you the game. It's not
Hmm.
whether they have more models than you or not. It's just how many points you end up scoring in it. But it's still a hard one when, especially um, when you're at R tier, where
Yeah.
where
At the
you
bottom.
are losing um, pretty pretty consistently, or at
Yep.
least you're not chasing the meta, so your list isn't as robust, or you haven't been playing it for as long, so you don't have as big of an army
Hmm.
from years of kind of growth um, or just experience with the army. It's easy to get caught in the shoot back, shoot back, shoot back
Yep.
kind of
Yep.
mentality.
Yes, absolutely. Um, and the other thing as part of the whole learning experience too is like understanding the rules and understanding the rules as they relate to things like terrain and making sure at the
Mhm.
start of the game that you understand how that works. Because I think it wasn't until like the second or maybe even the last game of that tournament that I was like, oh, so this is what the rule is. Or I think it was the second game that the rule for the ground floor in the Warhammer Tournament Companion, the
Yeah.
WTC terrain was if I'm in it, I can't see out and they can't see in. Like
Mhm.
it's no windows, it's just zone. And I didn't take advantage of that at all in my
No.
deployment because I wasn't familiar enough with the rules.
It
Um,
it could even be a small thing. I did after that tournament, I did a quick tutorial kind of friendly game with somebody,
mhm,
and they reminded me consolidation on the fight phase. You
mhm,
always consolidate on the fight phase.
right.
Like, and it was one of those things where I had forgotten all about it. It was a simple rule like that of you
What do
consolidate
you,
on the first when you're first fighting, and then
mhm, you
as
pile in?
models are gone, you can pile in more. You pile in again, type of thing. So
Oh,
it's always keeping them within engagement range and base to base contact and things like that. Um, it's just it was one of those things where I was like, oh, it's a small thing that you just sometimes don't think about. And when you're playing in tournaments, the other thing that can catch you is the clock. You're always thinking, oh, how long have we been playing here? I don't want
right.
to slow things down. I want to keep things moving. Oh, I forgot to do this with this guy. Oh, forget it. I'll
Yeah.
remember it next round. You never
Yeah.
remember it the next round.
You don't remember it, and then next round they're like dice down in 10 minutes, and you're like, well, I guess we'll have to talk out this next round because
Yes. Yes.
we're not going to reach it. So that's it. So as I understand it, just to talk a little bit more about what you just said there about consolidating. So we're in the fight phase. Uh, I fight, and then I remove some of your models, and then I can pile in more.
Yeah. You can pile in, and when it's my turn, I can pile in if there's any gaps
Hmm.
and things like that. Like
Oh,
your
right. Yeah,
models
you
can
can pile in.
constantly be moving type of thing.
Right.
It's not always just a static. that's kind of
Uh,
what happened to them.
there you go, folks. You get an education on this.
Hmm.
Little little bit of learning.
Yeah.
And if that's entirely wrong, just comments below and
Yeah.
we'll read them.
Comment, let us know, be like, hey, you guys are misinterpreting things again.
Yeah, you guys
And
are nuts.
fair
This is way
enough.
off. Fair enough. Yeah,
Fair
probably
enough.
not wrong. So what are you playing these days? What are you focused on?
Right now, so I've been playing a lot of Space Marines,
Hmm.
and when the Votan came out, I had bought their box set. I had actually bought
Yep.
two of their army box sets, so I was building
Right.
them out. I got some off of you.
Hmm.
So I'm building a Votan army right now, and that's
Nice.
going to be my focus of kind of building and learning to play something completely different. Um,
Fun. That's a
yeah,
lot of fun.
I find it's going to be a really challenging experience considering I haven't
Hmm.
mastered Space Marines
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
any means. But
Eh, what are you
I
gonna do?
I didn't I wanted to play an army that was different. And I feel
Yes.
like Votan is extremely different from what we've got. It's a
Judgment tokens. Yep.
judgment tokens. It's a smaller model range because they're really
Hmm.
brand new.
Yep.
So really you've got, I think, maybe eight models that you go against, like within the
Yep.
range, something like that, 8 to 10, and you've got to build a 2,000 point army off them.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now is building that, get some
Hmm.
play testing in, and just hopefully get really good with them. What about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, so right now, AOS fourth Age of Sigmar fourth edition came out
Hmm.
today. It's July 13th, as we're recording this. The rules and the faction packs have been out for a week. I'm super excited about it. I was watching it online. I've been reading the rules. Been watching Rob, the Honest Wargamer, go through the faction packs and all that good stuff. So I love the models for Age of Sigmar. I've been collecting it since Dominion, since third, and hadn't I'd built some and painted some just for the hobbying.
Right.
So now I'm like, it's time to play.
Hmm.
Like, let's get on with this. So I'm focused. I was actually painting this morning. I got some Chaos Chosen primed and started my test model.
Nice.
So, as part of my painting process, I always like to paint one model completely from start to finish. And then I tweak that recipe or me method as I complete the rest of the project. That's kind of
Hmm.
like how I like to do things. It works really well for me. So, all that to say, I am kind of focused on AOS fourth
Sigmar.
edition, Age of Sigmar fourth edition.
Yeah.
Because there's a tournament coming up, which will
Nice.
be featured in a later podcast.
Yeah.
I think the second week of August, there's a 1,000 point intro to Age of Sigmar at my friendly local game store tournament, which I'm really looking forward to.
That's awesome.
1,000 points, great point to jump in,
Hmm.
especially since I basically already have. I have a Slaves to Darkness because I bought the box
Hmm.
I think when they did their launch in third, and that's kind of sucked me in.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm focused on now. I'm also playing in a Horus Heresy um, campaign with three other players. It's a narrative campaign
Right.
um, where we have two more games to get through to finish that. And then for 40K, because I bought so many different armies, I haven't quite decided which one I'm going to be focused on next. I've played my Black Templars quite a bit.
Hmm.
I'm pretty satisfied with how I've played them. I'm not the best at lists, have been closer than others. I haven't been like I played last weekend and was basically tabled by the end of turn two. But again, I built like more of a friendly list when I should have went more heavy on multiple smaller units.
Hmm.
To kind of flood the board, be a horde army, meaning lots of models,
Yep.
lots and lots of infantry, to try and choke up the, you know, if he so the opponent I played ran three Doomsday Arc. It's a Necron unit. He was running Necrons. And the Doomsday Arc's got a powerful gun. I think it has a blast profile for the 40K players. So you get um,
Extra
a
shot for
number of
every
shot.
five.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Extra shots for every five models that you're shooting at. So a smaller unit, that's kind of less useful on. So if I had more of those things, he would have had to decide where he was shooting.
Mhm.
And I, of course, brought two tanks because I really like the models and I think they're painted pretty good. And I like seeing them on the board. And he shot one right off the board in turn one. So I never got to roll a single dice with it. And then
That's
I
not
was
true.
like,
You did. You got to roll a saving throw or a deadly
yeah,
demise.
I did not get to roll a save, I don't think. Maybe I did. Maybe one save. Um, but and that was a case of also having forgot a lesson I learned at that critical hit tournament of
Mhm.
keeping things in reserves.
Yes.
Because I and being careful about what you place on the board and where when you're deploying in these games. Um, but having said that, I am really tempted to work on my beloved Chaos Space Marines because I've been collecting them since I started, and
Hmm.
I'd really like to get 2,000 points painted on the table. I like the Deceptors um, detachment. I know it's not competitive, but I just think it's cool and it's fun. I
I
think it'd
s-
be very fun to play.
I struggle
Um,
with how not competitive it can be when something like the sorry, not Necrons, Tyranids have basically an infiltrator detachment rule as well, and it
mhm.
seems to work really well for people. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out how to get it to work. It's not so
Yeah.
much that it can't work. It's just that, okay, what are the ins and outs? Because infiltrating basically just means you can move outside your deployment zone right
Yeah,
in
you can
turn one.
in no man's land in term you can deploy your unit anywhere that isn't your opponent's deployment zone and is at least 9 inches away from any enemy model.
Hmm.
Um, so it's just a lot of fun. And that detachment lets you dump a lot of units. Now, granted, they're just basic units. They're the cultists or the legionnaires, but it lets you throw a bunch out there for that reason.
Yeah.
I'm also, you know, crippled by indecision. I'm also really wanting to play Necrons because I was lucky enough to get a monolith as a gift. And I like the idea of that hyperphasing, moving models around the table. I think it will be
Hmm.
a lot of fun. And it could be a disaster for me because, I'm gonna build that list around models I like and that I like the look of and that I like how I painted.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be like super meta. It's gonna be like a lot of Necron warriors because I find them very fun to paint
Hmm.
and Scorpec destroyers because again I think they look great. I think they're a lot of fun, but you
Well, and
don't see
it's
them when you play people at tournaments that are
no,
running Necron lists. You don't see Scorpecs.
but it's deciding, and this is something else that we'll get to in the future. It's like a future
Hmm.
topic, but there's playing for yourself and then playing for a tournament.
Yeah.
And so if you're playing games with just local people and you're just setting it up, you can kind of have that fun list aspect to it.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
it's if you're taking it to a tournament, then you're going with a completely different set of expectations type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you could
Absolutely.
still do that. I think you can still have a really awesome Necrons list, just maybe not one that you'd take to a tournament.
Yeah. I'll take it to a tournament. I don't care.
It's all still for fun. Who cares? Um,
Yeah. That I mean that's definitely something to because I mean we're all feeling the crunch these days
mhm.
financially with the inflation and everything like that. So definitely a topic that I want to get into in future is like making the most of what you have.
Yeah.
Um, because that's where that's the kind of point that I'm at in my gaming. I'm like, I've collected all this stuff. I mean, Imperium magazine, that subscription was a huge help because it really filled out my Space Marine and
Hmm.
Necron armies. Um, but I want to make the most of what I actually own. What's, maybe just sitting primed, unpainted, you know what I mean? Not finished, and
Yep.
getting them finished and on the table before I start. You'll hear about units that, um, well, before the last balance slate update, the Nurglings, for example. Now I'm a Death Guard player. And people were bringing tons of Nurglings for doing secondaries. Now that's been changed with that update, of course. Um, so now they're back on store shelves, and I actually saw them on store shelves, and it was like, oh, cool. And then I was like, nope, nope, not gonna do it. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, I've invested enough already in a lot of these armies, and I'm like, I want to try and see what they're like to play with what I have.
Mhm.
And that's really my focus with a lot of my hobbying right now, and a lot of the list building is like making it work with what I've got.
Yep. Yeah. That's a
So,
that's a that's a great way. And that's kind of how I started to approach my Imperial
mhm.
Fist army was I have a lot of stuff. I need to just kind of work with what I've got because I started out with combat patrols and all these other things where
Yep,
some really good units showed up in there. I had no idea how to use them.
same.
Now I'm learning how to use them. I still have a lot of chaff, but
Hmm.
I've also got some good stuff in there. So it's just a matter of kind of figuring it all out,
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
and going from there. Okay. Well, I think this has been a really great first episode.
Yeah, I think it's the best first episode I've ever heard. Be the first one to say it. Comment below if you disagree.
Comment. We're going to be releasing these on hopefully a bi-weekly kind of pattern. So every 2 weeks, we're going to try and get some topic out there.
Yep,
Again, covering local games, local tournaments, various topics. I call it tips and tricks, but it's mostly going to be learn from our mistakes,
yeah,
type of
definitely.
perspective. Again, we're not the best of the best, but we're real people playing our fun game. And we hope you're here for the ride. So please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.
Take it easy.